It's really a pleasure to be here today in my own backyard speaking to all of you. I am a 1991 Brainerd High School graduate. And the drumming thing is interesting because I have people say, weren't you the drummer? Because you don't forget the drummers in high school, right? Our organization, Strong Towns, is a 501c3 nonprofit based out of Brainerd, Minnesota. We actually have offices in the Northern Pacific Clock Tower building. Our mission is to support a model of growth that allows America's towns to become financially strong and resilient. And I've been, the last year and a half, touring around the country sharing this message with groups. And so it's really an honor to be invited by the Hunts, who I've known for a long, long time. Their son had my dad as a teacher, and they've been out to our farm when I was a kid. And I remember, Mrs. Hunt showing up in school with a cake at the college for Ryan's 16th birthday, so as a blast. Our organization started out as a blog, and it actually wasn't even an organization as much as it just was this single person writing down his thoughts and really trying to find out, is there anybody else out there who is seeing things the way I'm seeing them? We all, live in communities and work in places. And as a professional, as someone who had worked in the engineering profession, worked in the planning profession, supposedly, the expert that is designing and shaping and building communities, I was finding that I didn't have the answers. And I had more questions than I did answers. I saw things that weren't working out, things that weren't going right. And I started this blog as a way to do two things. First, to kind of explore myself, the ideas that were swirling around in my head. When you write things down, it kind of forces you to think them through a little bit. But then also to just go out and say, okay, outside of my community, in this broader world, is there anybody else who's experiencing these same things? Is there anybody else who is seeing the world in the way that I'm seeing it? Because I'm not finding it here where I'm at. There was one person. There are many people, but there's one person in particular. His name's George. Yeah, this is George. George is a cool guy. He's a lot of fun. You can see he's got a bubbly personality. There's one guy that kind of started to become annoying to me. I had a lot of people who were commenting on our stuff, on the stuff I was writing and emailing me, but George was incessant. I would post something at 5 a.m., and by 5:05, he had a comment down. And then he started emailing me, and then he got my Facebook connection and started instant messaging me all the time. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And pretty soon he's out taking photos in his own community and sending them to me and saying, Chuck, I don't understand what you're saying. I don't think this applies. You're going to have to explain this differently, explain this better. After about a year and a half, we were kind of making progress. I remember at one point he said, gosh, I think I'm starting to get it. And he invited me to come to his community for a curbside chat. It's a presentation that we do with the public to talk about the development pattern of the post-World War II and the financial implications of it. And I went to his community, and we met beforehand and drove around and looked at things and, did the curbside chat and then went out for dinner. And I remember thinking, I like this guy, but I have no clue what's going to come of all this time I'm spending. Is this just time I'm never going to get back? Because while well-intentioned, I didn't see the capacity that George had. Well, let's fast forward a year. And all of a sudden, George has not only been motivated enough to put himself on the local planning commission, but now George has started his own blog where he's actually looking at his city, with a different set of eyes. Understand, this guy is a musician too. He's a trombone player. This is not an engineer. This is not a planner. This guy has no education, no certification. But he's going around and, it's time for some action. Here's an opportunity. This property's up for sale. We need to do something about this. And he goes on in his writing to kind of describe in his own place exactly how they can start to bring things back. He has gotten local groups together to start to go out and do small-scale projects to make the community better. He started to host coffees. He's went and made a presentation to his own city council about lost opportunities around town and how they can change things and how the city code, in this instance, requires an overabundance of parking. So all of a sudden, there's this guy in this town running around doing all of this stuff. And he is leading the agenda in his community. He's literally changing projects, changing investments, changing the way his community goes out and does things. No experience, no technical knowledge, no background, just a desire and a passion to see his place a little bit differently. George is a pretty triumphant guy, and I love this guy, I do. We've come to the conclusion at Strong Towns that what we need is not better professionals. What we need is not reform in government policies and programs. What we need is we need a country with a lot more Georges. If you look at the way we have built our cities, if you go back thousands and thousands of years across different cultures, across different civilizations, you'll see a pattern of development that is very, very similar. This is ancient Rome. Literally, you could go to the cities in Asia, ancient cities in South America, North America. You can go to the way Pine River looked like 150 years ago. You can go to, the 5,000 BC civilizations we've dug up in the Fertile Crescent. And you'll see a pattern of development that is eerily similar. In planning school, we're taught this pattern of development is similar because it was based around the primary mode of transportation of the day, basically your ability to walk. Because we built cities around for people that walked, they're scaled differently, the buildings are aligned differently, the public spaces are different than what they are today when we started to build cities around the automobile. There's another important insight, though, about this. The cities that we're looking at, whether it's from ancient Rome and ancient Greece or the Fertile Crescent or wherever, are the places that endured long enough to be excavated and studied. They're the places that actually succeeded. For every Rome, there were 1,000 other cities that were founded trying to do things slightly differently in a different way that didn't work out. But somehow, we figured it out. And if you look at places like Pine River or like my hometown of Brainerd, and you look at the way they were built and configured 100 years ago, what you're seeing is not a local knowledge. You're seeing a local architecture, local building materials, and local vernacular. But what you're seeing is the culmination of thousands of years of experimentation on how to build places. Places that were resilient financially, places that were resilient politically, socially, and culturally. We literally just copied what our ancestors had done through trial and error in the past. After World War II, we started a new experiment in how to build places. We had this fabulous invention, the automobile. It was starting to transform our communities, and we developed a whole set of policies, a whole set of procedures, a whole set of funding mechanisms to start to build places around this new technology. Today, as we sit here, this seems like a normal way of doing things to us. We've literally, very few people in this room today can remember what life was like before the automobile and before the design of our places around the automobile. Yet, this approach, the auto design approach, is a very, very young experiment. We've only been doing this a blink of an eye in terms of human history. It has not proven its resilience. It's not proven its robustness over time, while this has. And so it's an important distinction to know and to understand that we are literally living through this great social experiment. It's a very young experiment, and we're now just starting to kind of come to grips with some of the realities of what it's put in front of us. I'm going to give you a couple examples of ways that the fine-grained approach is very different than the large-scale approach of this suburban experiment. We went and simply looked at kind of the marquee investment along the 371 strip. This is the Mills Fleet Farm site. I'm sure everybody in this room, when I go around the country and present, I have to explain to them what Mills is. We all understand this site. We've all been here. You've got the big box store, the auto dealership, and the gas station. This is the marquee investment on the 371 strip. There's no single property that is worth more money, more valuable than this particular strip. If you look at it, it produces, in terms of tax base, $600,000 per acre, 0.6 million, 600,000. It's a huge, huge investment. But if you take that same exact land area and you overlay that in the downtown of Brainerd, which, Brainerd is my hometown. I love the place, but downtown Brainerd is not exactly your marquee investment. You've got a lot of dilapidated properties, a lot of rundown things. There's some green shoots going on, but this is kind of a rough place to be at times. If you take the same exact area of the mill site, you have a development pattern that generates 78% more value, $1.1 million. Now, look at this for a sec in terms of the individual doing things better. One developer, one site, one enormous investment. 134 different properties. 134 different properties with different people working cumulatively, kind of, organically in their own little way to make their properties better. If you look at this, how much money does it take to create one of these? $100 million for the highway, millions of dollars for these accesses, millions of dollars for the county road, $30 million for sewer treatment ponds and pumps and towers and everything else to get this. How much money did it take us to create that? I mean, literally, it was my great-great-grandfathers and their contemporaries that built the infrastructure that continues to support that pattern today. All we have to do is maintain it. If you look, it's the individual working at the very small scale that actually creates the value that drives our communities. If you look at the way our ancestors built places, they didn't build them the way we build them today. These massive investments that are daisy-chained off of other massive investments. The whole concept of build it and they will come is a modern incarnation. If you look at the way our ancestors built places, it was very incremental over time. This is Front Street in Brainerd back in 1870. Okay? You can see, a bunch of just pop-up little buildings. There's a billiard hall here. That's a restaurant. I'm sure there was a brothel in there somewhere. Just a bunch of pop-up buildings by a bunch of uneducated, probably illiterate, backwoods hicks in the middle of nowhere, popping up some buildings. But it took, and things started to work out, and pretty soon you had a block that looks like this. This is literally 30 years later, okay? This didn't happen because we went in and made some huge investment. This didn't happen because, we made some big infrastructure improvement or spent millions of dollars. This happened because these people working independently to incrementally build their places over time organically evolved into this fantastic place. And if you fast forward another 50 years, you get a place that looks like this. The way we build successful places is not with large transformative investments. That's a suburban experiment model, and that model is not only failed, but we literally don't have the funds to continue doing it. The way we build fantastic places is incrementally, one tiny step at a time. If you look at this, picture of Brainerd Front Street from the early 1900s, this is a pretty fantastic place. I mean, as a planner, I would kill to have a place back like this today. You look and the spacing of the buildings are wonderful. The delineation of space is fantastic. Even the buildings themselves have great symmetry, have great architecture to them. This is an absolutely wonderful place. If you want to understand in a microcosm why we are broke in this country and why we can no longer continue with this suburban experiment the way we've done it, understand that this place here we built incrementally over time, yet after 60 years of professional expertise, zoning codes, financial incentives, kind of top-down incentives to create growth in our places, this is what this street looks like. It's essentially a wasteland of parking lots, abandoned buildings, and low-return investments. There's $500,000 of infrastructure in that street. Yet, the street itself creates hardly any wealth, hardly create any value, certainly nothing that is comparative to the amount of public liability that we have to maintain that infrastructure. There is a saying that's come out of Silicon Valley the last few years, and it is an insight from the connected world of computer innovation and digital networking, but it holds true to the way we build our places as well. Innovation that happens from the top down tends to be orderly but dumb, while innovation that happens from the bottom up tends to be chaotic but smart. There are huge advantages to doing things in a top-down way. You can get results very quickly that are very efficient. When we finished World War II and came back here, the lessons that we learned in terms of mobilizing a military, putting a fighting force into place, the lessons that we learned in hierarchical top-down management served us well. We came back, we came out with all of these programs from the Interstate Highway Act to the GI Bill to the way we funded local growth, eventually things that became Fannie and Freddie. We look at all these innovations that we had, and they were top-down, efficient, orderly models designed to create certain results. The problem is that these systems don't evolve and adapt over time. They're dumb. And so what you wind up is with a system where we're building highways where we don't need them, we're building houses where we can't afford them, and we're doing all these things in order to perpetuate this ongoing system. A system from the bottom up is far less efficient and orderly, but much smarter and much smarter, but at the cost of a little bit of chaos. Let me show you what this looks like in our communities, a bottom-up approach. This is a group in the city of Memphis. Now, I was in Memphis last year. I'm going back here in a few weeks. Memphis is a city by any American standards pretty down on their luck, right? When you look at metrics of despair, whether it's abandoned housing, teenage pregnancy, crime, whatever it is, Memphis is always at the top, being the negative end of these lists. But there's some great things going on in Memphis today because they've actually realized that their future is not going to be fixed from a top-down approach, but from a bottom-up. And so you look, this is a 2-block segment where literally some residents were sick of the city government being unable to just do basic things on their street. And so they went down to the hardware store, bought some buckets of paint, and they started painting crosswalks. They started painting bike lanes. They put in a mural. Literally for $500 of paint, they started to transform their neighborhood. They started to build it into a pretty spectacular place. Now, I know what my city would do if we went out and did this, right? I mean, the next day we'd be out with power washers trying to get all this off. That line's not straight, so someone's gonna, wander out and get hit or what have you. This is chaotic, right? This is not the order that we're used to in our places. Yet the innovation that's going on here is the thing that's going to save our communities. It's this group of Georges out there doing things that are literally going to make our communities better. And let me demonstrate to you how high return these investments are. $500 of paint. There's 2 blocks of commercial property here. Before this project started, they were half vacant. 6 months after this project, not only are they all full, but I spoke with the landlord of one of the buildings, and he said the rent he was able to get on the last one was double the rent he was asking for before the project. You want to talk about high return investments. Bottom-up, chaotic, but smart approaches are the ways that we're going to change our communities. We're going to make them grow, we're going to make them flourish, and we're going to make them productive and prosperous places. There's a model for this. Not only the model of human civilization for thousands of years, but there's a model that is more recent. This is Tokyo, 1945. And we know what Tokyo 1945 was like implicitly. It was not a great place. It had been subjected to a long period of firebombing. Literally, the wood buildings that were there were all gone and all burnt down. The only thing you see here were the rock structures that were left. Hundreds of thousands of people living in this city, and the city completely devastated. An economy that had literally, no ability to rebuild itself. A government in tatters, and literally hundreds of thousands of people left in despair. What do? There was an understanding that, we're not as a government going to be able to come in and rebuild all these places. We're not going to come in and fill in what was there. We're not, we don't have the resources. We don't have the wherewithal. We don't have the time to come in and fix everything that is now broken because of this horrible war. What happened? Literally, thousands of people in the city just went out and started rebuilding things, one block at a time, little bit by little bit by little bit. There's a fantastic story this week that was sent to me that I posted on our website that details exactly how this happened, and is beautiful. It's beautiful because here are people in literally the pit of despair that pick up and without a top-down plan, without some type of huge intervention, start incrementally putting their places back together. And when you do this in this incremental, organic way, you get chaos. Some things work, some things don't. But what happens is, in a system like this, an organic system, the things that work start to get spread around, and they start to get copied, and they start to build on each other, again, in an incremental way. And they start to grow, and they start to take off, and they start to become more successful. And 60 years later, you wind up with fantastic, beautiful places. Now, I'm not suggesting we turn Pine River or Brainerd into Tokyo, but certainly with a different approach, with an incremental approach, with a George approach, we can start to make those modest little repairs, those little increments of investment, the painting of the crosswalks, the fixing of the streets, the sweeping of the sidewalks, the investments in the buildings that we've abandoned and looked at. We can start to make these type of incremental improvements that we know our ancestors were successful at doing. And we can literally start to build our communities back, recover from this experiment gone awry, and literally get back to a place where we're going to have productive, healthy, valuable communities. George is the key. And we have a room here full of Georges, literally full of people who have infinite capacities to do amazing things in their own community. And if there's one thing that I'm invigorated about the current hardship that we're suffering through, which literally, in the scope of human history is not hardship. In the scope of our recent history, it maybe is. But the thing that gives me some hope with, the pressure that we feel under in our communities today is that it's fertile ground for the emergence of Georges. If you want to do something productive for your place, be a George. And if you can't be a George, at least tolerate the emergence of Georges. Tolerate the chaos and the conversation and the dialogue and the failed experiments along with the successes that come with having Georges active in your community. That's the way we're going to fix these problems. That's the way we're going to build strong towns. So thank you so much for having me. Our organization is online at strongtowns.org. We do a blog 3 days a week, a podcast once a week, and a video once a week. You're all welcome to participate in our conversations going on there. Enjoy your day. This is going to be a lot of fun. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.